What's funny is I tell a lot of people this, that once I'm finished with a project, it's almost like the project is over and the door is shut and it's locked. And then I go on to the next thing, because some of it is you're so entrenched in everything that's going on, from you hear every little thing to I think I heard something to was that great, or I thought it was great, or I watched I think it's called Aged Out podcast. It was with Paul Nalesnik, and it was like,
Yes, those are great guys. I listen to their stuff every time they drop a new
it's pretty cool.
podcast.
So
Yeah.
they had Paul talking about the 2017 line compared to the 1994 line. So I listened to it. I'm like, damn, we were good in '94. But like I just remember '94 was over. I'm like, on to the next thing. On to marching band, on to, and I saw '94 a video. Maybe one of you guys. There's this guy Brian Smith. Who's Brian Smith?
I have no idea who he is, but is that like the?
He posts it's like these high cam videos and stuff that not just from finals, but from like he posted something '94 from Allentown, and I had not seen '94 since it was live. I mean, I left, moved on to the next thing, and man, I started like messaging like Mark Sylvester. Mark, this was brilliant. And actually, George Hopkins, like, man, George Wiley, the core was awesome back then. Just people from the past that, and I hadn't seen '94. But it's just like that. That's how I am. It's like I shut the door and then I kind of move on to the next project. Not that I don't want to see it, but I think for all of us too that have done this for a long time, there is, like we're not perfect, and so there's a sense of there's times that I lack confidence. That I'll look at something, I'm like, oh, that sucked, or I'll see something else, I'm like, oh, I can't be as good as that, or oh my God, so sometimes I have to, in order to clear my mind and move on to another project and feel good, I can't watch anything. I have to just stop. Because it could take me down a rabbit hole where I'm like, okay, I can't do anything. I can't write,
I think a lot of creatives in this activity know exactly what you're talking about. It is such a grind, such a journey to take it from just an idea in your head to having it live in front of you. And at some point, you do just have to arbitrarily say, "This is where it ends, and I'm done with it, and now I'm going to be moving on to the next thing." And that's important. I think what's nice about that is that that's the mark of an artist. Where it's literally the creation of the work is enough. That's the point. And anything beyond that is gravy, extra, but not necessary. It's what was once an idea now lives. That's expression. That's what it's supposed to be. What I'm curious about, Tom, is when did you start to try writing? Obviously it was before '89. But like, when did you start to be like, okay, this is something I want to add to my toolbox? What were some early attempts or early situations before we actually got to see that product on the big stage?
I think actually the first thing I ever wrote was Crown Imperial. It was a parade tune from my high school. I had graduated and I was going to Westchester, and the band director asked me to write it. And it was just a parade tune. So I wrote it. It was Crown Imperial. And then eventually I started writing the Westchester shows. My first indoor show I wrote was 1984. I wrote it for Westchester, and we were going to go to PAS and compete with like North Texas and Morehead State and Michigan State and all these great groups. One of the pieces was 9 or 2. It was like the Lancer.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
That
So
piece,
we never really. We did some local things, but just couldn't get the finances together to go, and do it. And then I started teaching some groups locally. And here's the thing. So you start teaching some groups, And the first two groups I taught was Plymouth Whitemarsh and Steinert High School. At Steinert High School, I was the color guard drill person. Now, I had just finished, teaching 85 cadets. Michael Klesch and I were roommates. Michael was the drill tech for the band, and I was the drill person for the color guard. At Plymouth Whitemarsh, I just taught the drumline hands. So they already had guys writing. Actually, that's the funny part. At Steinert High School, I think the guy was a little intimidated, so he wouldn't even allow me to go around the drum line. But it was some cash. I was making like $200 a rehearsal. I mean, good programs that paid pretty good back then. As far as, I wrote for the Buccaneers in '88. Trying to think, I wrote maybe another Williamsport High School in Pennsylvania, something like that. But I mean, really, the first was '89. Just really, that was, that I could be. God, that was my first shot at it. I remember. So the first thing I wrote was Plummet Attack, and so I brought it down to a camp. And I had built a line up. So '89 was probably the culmination of what I had done from '85 on. It was kind of my program anyway, technically, and how we played and all that. So now I was writing, so I had guys that marched 5, 6, 7 years. So I had Lee Bettis in there, Willie Higgins, Jareed, who was on, I believe, on your show, Corley, and so I had guys that it was a veteran cadet line. So came down, I was excited, and Hannum came down, right? And so they were nervous. George asked Hannum to come down because he was nervous because it was my first shot writing. And so they were always like, oh, like, what is he going to do? What's going to happen? And so, we're playing it, and it's like, I mean, I think we're killing it. Like, we're playing some stuff, and I'm going, this is awesome. And, and they were all nervous. And I remember Tom coming over. He's like, man, are these guys going to be able to play this? I mean, there's some like stuff that's off the charts. And again, another defining moment was like, really? I'll show you. I don't think, and you can ask those guys, we didn't do a lot of cutting in '89. We might have done some stuff where we did it for balance, but we didn't do a lot of because they couldn't play it kind of thing, And I was really determined, I think, when he said that to me, I wasn't like, oh, like we're not going to be able. I was like, well, I actually told the drumline that, and they're like, and I remember Lee Bettis, he's like, really? We'll show them. Like, we're going to show you guys, because it was what '89 was what I always wanted to do as a player and a tech. Like, I didn't, and again, this is no knock on any of my instructors, great instructors. Hannum's my mentor. He's who I wanted to be, right? But it was like, when I wrote, it was like, this is what I always wanted to play. This is always what I wanted to teach. And I know this is what the kids want to play. It was like, let's do this. And we didn't, and it was, I know people think about this, but we didn't really care about winning. It was just like, let's just do this. Let's just show people we can do this. So I think outside people cared more about where we were at than, because the Corps had won 4 championships already. And we had just come off, 87, perfect score. The '88 line, I think, was better than '87. I mean, that was '87 and '88. That '88 line was a lot of the same dudes.
Yeah, and I said this on a previous podcast that I want to say the '88 line tied. It was like a 3-way tie for high drums or something like that, but they went to the GE score. I could.
No, but I can tell you, we won field percussion. We had a 14-9. Vanguard, they had like a 14-5 or something like that, but they added in the GE score because they had done away with a lot of they'd done away with GE percussion. And I don't know what the other ones were, but I remember getting on the elevator with Tom Float, and we're going up, and Hannah and I are looking at the recap and like, what's happening here? Float's like, hey man, it's like, hey Tom, what's going on? He's like, you guys won drums. I go, I know. Why did they just announce, Vanguard's like, I don't know.
I could totally picture that too. That's what's funny. It's like, yo,
Yeah. But,
The float coolness just talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about 89. So, Hannum's there. You're the tech from 85 through 88. Then all of a sudden it's like I don't know the circumstances why, but he leaves and then it's like they're handing you the keys to a Ferrari.
Yeah.
Like you said, the Cord won four championships and and it's like, here you go, here are the keys, and you're 26 years old at the time. Yeah, and what was that like back then? Were you like, give me this?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Well, I think since I was there, like I did every camp. I did tour from like 81 and up until I got married in 93. I did every day, tour and the whole thing. So I was ready for it. Like I felt I was ready. And Tom even, he was frustrated after 88. And I think one of the reasons he had left was he knew that I was kind of ready to take over the reins when the writing, 88, I had written some changes in here and there. And, I always, Tom was always very musical, right? Very appropriate. And it's hard I think it's hard for drum guys to do that, be very appropriate and musical, because they want to play this stuff. So what I wanted to try to do in 89 was I wanted to play the stuff, but I wanted to do it in a musical way. I wanted to do it where there weren't drum parts, but it was still music and it fit into what we were doing. Like, Tom was over here just being perfect with the music and not writing drum parts and writing music. We used to talk about that. Like we're writing an ensemble piece, right? And then you had some drum lines who were just killing it with parts, and you just go, man, that's awesome. But sometimes they didn't go together. And so I always thought when I was writing was I want to be able to play the stuff my way, but take what I learned from Tom and, what I saw Float do, what I saw Ralph do, what I saw all these other drum lines do. How can we do that and package it so it was a total package, but we're still playing that stuff that the kids, George used to get on me. He's like, it's like, Tom, you have to you can't always just write for the kids. I'm like, well, that's at the top of my list. If I see Jareed happy, I'm good. If I see Lee Bettis happy, I'm good. If I see any of these guys happy, I'm good. That was my thing. If we were third in drums, we were. But if the kids are digging what we're doing, I'm like, I'm good to go. I've done my job. Now, am I gonna, do what I got to do to be competitive and all that? Yeah. But I think I wanted to try to marry what I learned from Tom, and then what I always wanted to do, and go, all right, here's the new, Garfield Cadets, or what were the Cadets of Bergen County back then. So.
Yeah. And and it's cool listening, like being back then I was 15 in 1989 and hearing that show, and after wearing out tapes of earlier years as a youth, here comes the 89 show, and it's completely different than anything like East Coast has ever put out. The aggressiveness of that book is just off the charts. And then later on, Sajjad, he gave me it's on YouTube now, but the warm-up cassette from the finals lot, and I wore that out, and I couldn't believe how. I mean, it's like, what didn't you put in that book? It was just awesome. It's still one of my all-time favorite books just to listen to on audio.
And it's Tom, it's really great to hear what you were trying to achieve that year, which was like, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this for us. We're going to do what we want to do finally, right? And when you look back now with the benefit of hindsight and decades removed, that line still resonates for people. And I think part of that is because of the why behind it, which is like a little bit of a lesson for when you're in the weeds, in a current situation, and you really sit there and you can ask yourself, why am I doing this? Is this going to have an impact that really resonates for my kids, for the audience after this is over, And you've done that multiple times, with multiple groups, multiple eras, multiple, not, and with Dartmouth too, you've done that for people. So that's really fantastic. We talk about 89 all the time.
Oh, I hype on 89, And did you ever, when you wrote it, that the jury, the plummet attack, the hurt, the single fire, hurt, the roll shot, did you ever think that was going to be like the one of the trademark moments?
I don't know. I don't think so. I just I think the other thing that I tried to do too was, like I was trying to kind of tell people who I was. And so I always found a way to okay, here's some space. I can do something cool in here. Or, yeah, that's cool. I can, but people that really kind of know well, I said this earlier. So I kind of grew up shy, not having a lot of confidence in myself. Drumming was my self-worth. I mean, that's how I was like, I can do this, right? It was okay in school. It was like a C average. And I think I had to take my SAT like 4 times in order to get into college. And I still, all those scores didn't add up, right? It was like, so drumming and doing drum corps was a way to kind of go, wow, I can do this and I can show people who I really am. And so 89 was like, like there's a fire. I still have a fire, I still have an energy, and I still have there's this tenacity just to go after it. And so I wanted people to hear and see that in the drum line. Like I wanted to go, that's Aungst. That's me. I wanted to make a mark. Now, did I think it was one of these, like, 30 years later, people are going to talk about it? No, but it was, I don't know. It was after, let's see, I guess I was 26 years old. I wanted to tell people that I'm good enough as a person. You know what I'm saying? We grow up and we're a little kid and we want to try to find our niche. And okay, I found my niche. And now I want to go, you know what? I am good enough. I can do this and I can do it at the highest level. And, here's who I am. And, man, I just remember, the thing I remember is the line, how they enjoyed getting their butts kicked. Because they love playing it, man. They're like, yeah, do it. And they all, like, I said this, I always back my kids up, right? I'm always there for them. Like I told you, 88, lunch was late. We're going to lunch. I'm taking the drum line. We're going. 89, man, same kind of thing. I would do anything for those kids. And I wrote for the kids. That was kind of part of who I was. But at the same time, I wanted to show people that, this is my personality. I wanted to so when I wrote that role, getting back around, it was like, I wanted to show everyone that, yeah, I still can be musical and just that one little role. But who knows? I don't remember, I think part of it too was, I don't know if I think I had a confidence too. Like I wanted to show people. So it wasn't like I wrote and I was timid. I wrote and I was aggressive. And I wanted to do this. I don't know if I'm doing a great job of explaining that, but that was, people say like, what line do you like and is your favorite? I think it's that one because it's me. It's my personality. And I wanted to go, here I am in an activity I love. And yes, I'm good enough to do drum corps. And I want to do this for a long time, not just like 89 and I'm out. I want to, I'm coming up on 58 here. And my youngest son's birthday is today. Noah.
Oh, wow.
That's right. Noah, yes. I saw that on Facebook. Yeah. Happy birthday, Noah.
And
yeah.
I just, I have goals for the cadets. We've been struggling the last couple of years, but man, I have this energy about the corps moving forward. And, I have these visions of us competitively being where we're at. And I still have that hunger. To do it at the highest level.
Yeah, and that the 2019 line, listening to that and seeing that the first time I saw it in theaters and then seeing it, luckily was fortunate enough to see it there in Indy, that the aggressiveness of that in 2019, the line in the book reminded me a lot of the 89 book. It just really in your face and it had that energy. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if
it was even from the tuning was, you know, I've learned a lot over decades of doing drum corps, and I learned from great people, right? You see Ralph, you see Float, you see Paul Rennick, Dennis DeLucia. I've had Tex, you know, Mike Stevens, John Burbank, Willie Higgins, you know, Paul Nalestik. So what I do is I'm always picking up. I'm always like, oh, that's cool. Wow, okay, let's try that. Huh. I had I don't know if you know this guy, Life Marweed. You ever hear him? And he's, you know, the Cavaliers, that kind of downstroke-ish look. That was really, you know, that was Life's thing. So he calls me in 1999, says, "Hey, Tom." It's like, I like to, you know, I'm in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. If you need some help, I'm like, sure. So, you know, I wanted to see what he had to say. You know, great player, marched great drum corps, Cavaliers. You know, taught them, and so he comes out, and you know, he's, you know, he kind of tells you how it is. He's like, yeah, you know, I see you haven't, you know, you've been second for like 5 years in a row in drums, and I think I can get you over the top. I'm like, okay, well, let's see what you got. What do you got? Seriously, it was like that. And the techs were looking at me like, and I'm like, all right, if you got something that's going to help me do what I need to do, I'm all for it. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, that's kind of bold. I mean, just coming and showing, hey, you know.
He did. He said, you're missing this exercise. You're missing this. He said, everything's a wrist turn and everything is fingers. And I went, okay, all right. So, you know, he was in for the one weekend, and what I learned from that, I learned a lot, was we're doing the right thing. Yes, that doesn't work for the way I write. Like what he's talking about, that's not how music is presented. Like I write the music, and the technique that we learn how to play is based off the music. It isn't like, here's a technique and then you write the music. It was kind of backwards. He was awesome. Here's how it changed. If you look at how I wrote in 1999 and 2000, it was because of him. 2000 line where I went, all right, I got this. Because at 99, I kind of lost my confidence a little bit. I'm like, okay, what am I doing? What's happening? And when he said that to me, I went, you know what? I got this. I can do this. And 2000 was just like, you know, that was a big jump. If you look at those 99 and 2000, you almost look like two different guys wrote. But it was me. I just kind of had my confidence back, and I went, I got this, you know. And that was a lot of the 2000 line. But it was this guy, Life Marweed, at a camp in 99, and I think he came around in the summer, where it was just like, I was like, yeah, no, that's not, you know, that's not who we are. We don't do that. And that elevated me to be, you know, because I think writing and doing the activity, it's about confidence. There's a lot of that goes into it. You know, when you sit down and write, you know, I'll watch some stuff, you know, like the 94 line, and I'm like, Jesus, how did I do that? I can't do that again, right? Even the Dartmouth stuff, I'll see some Dartmouth stuff. I'm like, wow, I just can't. I can't do that. If I can get my confidence back, then that's when, you know, I feel like I'm on the right track. So some of it, I think, when you're doing the activity for a long time, it's like feeling confident along the way, you know. And it's not placement.
Well, you go through. It's a roller coaster. It's a roller coaster for sure.
Yeah, really.
Real quick, you know, talking about writing, I had reached out to a couple of people, maybe some stuff that they wanted, questions they had for you, and one of them was Jareed. You know, Jareed actually has a few things that he wants answered, but one of the things was he wanted to know, do you really write the bass drum parts first when arranging the book? He says, because nobody writes bass parts like Aungst. He makes the bass parts sound like we're singing the tune of a piece we're playing. And I want to agree with him on that. And you look at bass parts, you're one of the people who really helped move bass drumming as far as writing wise from what it was. Let's take 89. Prior to 89, bass playing wasn't nearly what it was from 89 on, because that 89 bass book is something completely that you would never see any chord do in the past. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was way off the charts. And what made you write that bass book like that?
Yeah, well, I think we had the players again. You know, like I said, it was a veteran line, so it was about Jareed, and it was about Corley, and about those guys, Brad, and, you know, it was about when they smiled when they played that, I was like, shit, that's good. That's awesome. And again, I wanted to do stuff that I wanted to play the stuff and do it in a musical way, like I was saying earlier. So I think I just didn't want to do it in the snare line. I wanted to do it in the full book. Do I write the bass stuff first? I mean, I don't know, because my quad players will probably get upset with me. But I mean, Jareed knows this. So it didn't happen in '89, but I think it was after that. So I get on the quads, because a lot of the quad players we had in the '80s were kids that got cut from the snare line, and we taught them how to play quads. We didn't have quad players. We had snare drummers that learned how to play quads. So it was the early '90s, particularly '91. Maybe even '92. So it was, or '90 and '92, and it was somewhere in there that it. So I'd be like quads. Come on, man, we worked on that. What's happening here? And they're like whatever. And I look over, and Dorit or whoever would have their hand up. I'm like, yeah, what's going on? They're like, well, we can play that. Well, you can play that. Yeah, we split it on the bus. We got it. I'm like, all right, play.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the other things that he said is that if you remember hosing the snares and tenors in 91 and giving the parts to the bass line, he said it happened regularly to the point the bass line would already have the parts figured out before Aungst would tell us it was ours.
Well, because the 91 line those were all vets from 90, yeah, I mean just great players. And again, I think it's, there's sometimes if I hear a bass drum thing, I'll write it first. I mean, I'm a snare drummer, so I think it's typical where I'll write, like I'm finishing the closer for the core right now. So I was writing some stuff yesterday, and so I'll write a snare part, and I might write for, let's say, 32 counts, and then what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll orchestrate it. So I'll kind of write patterns and parts, and I'll get the groove and the style and whatever I want to do in it, and then I'll go back and I'll kind of I'll orchestrate how the tenor should fit into that, or maybe the tenor should play these 2 bars, and then the bassist should add their stuff. I do have a thing though. It's like I try to, and I learned this from Hannum, is pacing the performer. So he was always really good with, if you got a snare line, it's got to play like a minute and a half, and it's 200 beats a minute, like straight. There's a lot of chance in there, because they're running around, that there's going to be some stuff that they're not going to be able to handle consistently. So he would just adjust some things so the snares would have a little bit of a break, So we call it like pacing the performer. So I was doing that yesterday, where I said, okay, you know what? Snares and tenors are kind of cranking here for a while. I need to give the basses a little bit of a part or a lick here to let the snares and tenors kind of relax a little bit. And then so once I did that, then my next thing that I wrote, which was all snares, I kind of went back and forth between the snare, quad, and basses. So I don't do it all the time, but yeah, I mean, here's what's interesting. I hear quad parts and bass parts very tonally. If that makes any sense. Like a lot of guys write today, like they'll write quad parts, like, Paul Nalesnik, I'd write some stuff and then he'd go back in and change it. And I say, well, yeah, but I hear high to low. There's a reason why I wrote the Spock with the snare, and there's a reason why I wrote a rim shot on the low drum. So when they went the bass drums, it's like I hear that kind of tonal movement to the bottom drum, and I think that's just some old school writing. Hannum used to do that, and I know like Ralph, and you listen. A lot of those like Bayonne and stuff, you hear the phrasing and the shaping, it goes to the bottom drum, or if you want
the bottom release,
or if you want stuff that's a little bit louder, you normally, if you add those bottom drums in, it's going to give you a little bit more punch than, so still some of my writing and orchestration things that I learned way back then, I still kind of use, and I'm not saying that the way young guys right now is wrong, and they should use some of that, but I don't like Paul Nalesnik, or Paul Rennick. You hear a lot of that with Paul. You hear that kind of old school tonal movement with the basses and the quads and how it moves, through the line. So I think, that's maybe like I said, an old school thought process.
Well, I think when you talked about how when you took over writing duties, where Hannum was on the spectrum versus where like Float was on the spectrum at that time, and you wanted a little bit of both, right? I actually think it's a sort of an age-old debate about like choosing a lane. What kind of book are you going to write? What kind of line are you going to be? Are you going to be this kind of line or that kind of line? And I always felt like it was a little bit of a cop-out. There's definitely stuff that you lead with because of who you are, right? Personality-wise. But saying you can only be musical or only be choppy or only be tonal or only be like, well, these are interesting arounds, that just means you got to do the work to reconcile it. It just requires a little more work to satisfy sort of both masters, if that makes sense. And I do feel like at the top of the game, you got to do all of it.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing: if you want to be at the top of the game, it's more than a quad part or a bass lick, or a snare lick. It's about the front ensemble. It's about the battery book. It's about the music. It's about everything. And so Neil Larrabee, my writing partner for a lot of years at Cadets, and then even Dartmouth for 9 years. I brought him back in 2019. And it just having him back, it just went, for me, I just kind of went, wow, like it's still about the same stuff it was from the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s and all this. It's, it's excellence. It's quality, clarity, and cleanliness. You still have to be able to do that. So those three things that's how I'm writing now. Now, not that I didn't in 17 or 18, but I wrote the Blue Stars for a couple of years, and then I taught Crown, and I mentally got away from it. But Neil said, "Hey Tom, remember how we did this?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, tell me about it." And he told me, I'm like, "Yeah, it was about those three things: clarity, quality, and cleanliness, and the coordination of the front ensemble with the battery. It was a musical percussion ensemble, right? And it wasn't just the drum line playing great; it was the entire ensemble playing great, and we were never about the lot. The lot for us was always about you warm up and you get ready to perform. Now, a lot of groups, even in the 80s and the 90s, it was, that was, you talk to Scott Johnson, it's like, that's another performance for the Blue Devils, right? I think all that's cool. But so I'm all back to, hey, who are we? What do we do? What makes us great? What kind of propels us to where, we used to be, which is that excellence. And so I think I got caught up a little bit because I get older, and, you see some of the younger guys coming in, and it's like, oh, that's cool. No, I guess I have to include that. Or that's cool. Oh, I have to include that. So now I'm like, well, I have to include that, but it has to be my way. It has to be the way we're going to do it and who we are as the Cadets. So if we're going to go do some kind of drumline groove, it's probably not us. We're probably going to play a basic roll exercise. It's going to prep us for something in the show, right? Now, I'm not saying any other stuff is wrong. It's just, I think we're just starting to realize, like, okay, yeah, we know how to do this. We got to get back to some of that. So Neil's been, it's almost like he's my safety net, because Neil always reminds me, is like, Tom, I'm like, yes, Neil. He's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, you're right. Neil is one of the only guys, I don't listen to a lot of people. I'm very stubborn. I think I'm easy to work with. I can be intimidating. I try not to. I have bad dad jokes. My son reminds me all the time. But Neil is one of those guys that I listen to 100% of the time. Now, I may not do it, but I always listen, because when he says something, he's usually right. And that's why we worked together so great for decades at Cadets and Dartmouth, was a trust thing. And I knew Neil was going to kill himself to get it done, just like I do. right? So we had these similar personalities in how we went about it, and it made us the cadets percussion for, and Dartmouth too, So it's cool having him back, and he kind of reminds me, like, what's important to what we need to do.
Tom, can I ask you about something? I was talking to Robert about this before we got on today, and there's a little bit of a phenomenon that I've noticed when you look back on drum corps, specifically with percussion, dominance, basically. And if you look back at the 70s, you had Fred Sanford. If you look, then you got DeLucia, then you got Float. Then there's sort of a period of time where things are a little bit more democratic. You have lines like sort of trading off. Early 2000s, you guys were dominant. And now it seems like Rennick has that mantle of being dominant. What is that phenomenon, do you think? Because you've been on both sides of it, right? I mean, you were part of a line that sort of ended that dominance that Float had and sort of marked like a new chapter moving forward. What is it like to be in it while it's happening? And why do you think it happens? Like what explains this sort of fickleness of judging? Or, another possibility is that you just had like a nice crop of kids that were hitting, during a particular era. What exactly do you think goes into that?
Well, I think it's a lot of things. I think you got to have the players, right? I think that's important. I think, like, thinking back to the early 2000s. Now we had great players in the 90s too, but I think it's how you write. Like if you look at Paul Rennick a little bit, I mean, he's been around. I think he aged out in '86. Right, somewhere around there. So he's kind of my age now. So he went through decades of, with, I don't want to say lesser corps, but from a competitive standpoint, not from like, drum corps and quality, and all of a sudden he gets into Phantom and kind of hits his mark. And I think it's a learning curve that you have too, as a guy, where you learn. I mean, that's what I tried to do. I was saying that, like, I learned when I marched, I wanted to learn how to do it. Then when I started doing it, I would watch like Float and Hardeman and still Hannum and just kind of picking up stuff, and then young guys, like watching young guys teach, and then each year you kind of reevaluate and you go, okay, well, what were we missing? And then I think the pieces all came together for us for those 5 years, and it was had the right kids. Neil and I kind of hit the mark when it came to coordination. We hit the mark when it came to like the wow factor, where you play stuff and you go, wow, that was like incredible. We had percussive moments that were like wow factors. There's been some times where it's like, you maybe not long enough, and a judge will say, man, I wish I could see the keyboards one more time. I'm like, really? All right, so next year, well, now I saw the keyboards, now I don't see the drum line. Really? So you mix in what judges have said, and then about maybe the writing or whatever that is, and then it just seemed like it kind of all came together. So the 2000 line is a favorite line of mine. Again, veteran line, a lot of guys from 99, 98. And I remember from judges saying that we just didn't have enough musical content. Like we could play. We could ram. Like we was just like, we're playing, but it wasn't musical enough. Now, I don't remember what the exact words were. So in 2000, I wrote dynamics that were not matched with the horn line necessarily. So here's an example. So we did this clock thing, right? We played all this backfield stuff, and then we turn. It was like, bum, this big thing, right? So if you look at the horn score, it says forte to fortissimo the whole time. But what I had done was I had these just, I mean, there were more dynamics in that, whatever that minute was, than we might have had in the whole show, like the year before, because the activity was kind of pushing in that direction, maybe. You know what I'm saying? So my point is, you kind of learn what the judges say. You kind of learn from instructors. You kind of get the kids. You kind of put it all together, and now you kind of have your, I guess your style of the way you do it. I think what we always had in our pocket was we knew how to play clean, play great. That was always in our pocket, but we were maybe missing things along the way. And so that, I guess, that model, and then I think you got to have a great show too. I don't want to necessarily say you have to be like in the top 3 or 5 in the drum corps as far as a drum corps, but the show has to be, has to be pretty good. And I think you just kind of put that together. And I mean, you look back at those years, and we just had moments of greatness, of moments where you go, damn, that's good. I mean, I try not to I try not to look at my stuff and go, wow, that's great. It's hard for me to do that. But I can say there was some great stuff, man. The 03 line, that Malagania stuff, freaking, now that rocked, man. There was some funny story. There was this whole right, this whole, and I wrote that because George had pissed me off the day before we were going to do that. And I don't remember why it pissed me off. I'm like, ugh. So I went on the RV, and I'm like, so that whole thing was me being pissed off at George. But it came out cool. It was like, that's freaking cool, right? The snare thing on their backs. And so I think it's the writing. You learn about what the activity wants. You figure out where you're at. Confidence. The front ensemble to the battery has to be coordinated. You got to play great. I think you get all those pieces together, and I think that, plus we sounded different anyway, because I think we always sounded different, and we always had that we could play well. We just had to kind of bring some of the other pieces together, and I think that those 5, like, if you look at 89 and 90, like, look at the 90 year, like, we won drums, right? So I got a lot of shit after 89.
I was gonna say the 90 you're writing for 90s a lot different than 89. It's like 89, all right, here I am gonna be aggressive, but then it's like 90. You talk about Hannum writing more for the ensemble, and it seems like your 90 book was more written for the ensemble, and it worked. I mean, you guys won high drums. You guys won.
Yeah, everything. Because what was like, the word on the street in 89 from the judges was that it was too much. It was overwritten. It
wasn't too much. It wasn't.
I didn't think so, but it was. So here was the thing. I thought we had a great show. The horn line was good. I think if we would have had a great, and I'm not knocking. I never throw instructors under the bus. You know what I'm saying? I just think how, like the horn staff left in 88, and it was just the way it was. The horn line went through a lot of changes. But I think if they would have been stronger, people would have had a different opinion about the book. But so I would hear stuff even from George, and so 90 was a little bit different based on some of that, what people, their impression of 89 was like me busting through the gates going, here I am, and then 90 was like, all right, I'm here now, so. All right, let's package this thing a little bit differently than 89. And horn line was better. The core in general was stronger than 89.
Now I love it all, but do you ever find it a little weird that 90 is the line that won, but it seems like people talk more about 89 than they do 90?
Well, and I mean, I think that's typical too. Sometimes where you have a group that might have won drums. And there's a lot of other great stuff going on, right? Yeah, I mean, it's, you talk about 2019. I mean, I thought that was a great line. Yeah, and we just struggled with what had gone on with the core. We struggled visual. I mean, it's just like we didn't have the infrastructure. But man, that line was, I could play with any line that I had taught over the, whatever, 30 years of cadets. But yeah, but I think that's kind of maybe normal that, you know, and I think the other thing too was, and this is a good thing, you know, I mean, you know, George Hopkins stuff happened, and okay, so that's what it was. But he was the cadets. He was, you know, he was the leader. He kind of guided all of us in what we were going to, and how we were going to be, how we were going to act. And he was all about the core. He was all about 100 and, well, the numbers have changed over decades, so I'll just say 150. He was all about the core. He wasn't about winning drums. He wasn't about winning horns. It was about the drum corps. And we rehearsed like that. Like, drumline went to drill, the color guy went to drill, and then we went to sectionals. We did that for decades. But it was about the drum corps. So, you know, sometimes we made choices which were best for the drum corps. 2008, the end of the show. I don't know if you guys have seen the end of the show there, but just brilliant Jeff Sackdick drill. And you see what the drum line's doing back there? You'll never see that again. Pass-throughs 3 times. I mean, literally running 5 to 5. It's just out of control. And I remember when we were talking about the ending, and it was Jeff, myself, George. I don't know if Jay was there. It was Gino. And we were just kind of saying that, okay, so just so you realize, we are not going to be able to play at the highest level. Like, we're not going to be able to play perfectly clean in that drill. And I remember George going, well, we're going to have to, it's got to be about the core. What's best for the core right now? And I remember that conversation. I'm like, and you see Jeff Prosperi, right? You see that's famous drill thing going on, and Jeff's in there running, and he knew exactly where he was going. But you listen to the tape, there's about 3 or 4 things in there. But we just were not going to play the way I wanted to play. But I went, all right, this is what the core wants. And you look at the ending up top and you go, magnificent, right? You see everything and you go, unbelievable. 07, same, 2007. That was a fierce drum corps. 2007, man. That music and the drill was like, I mean, off the charts. It's like, you know. But it was one of those, like, even when we, like, that closer was 2 minutes and maybe 45 seconds. 2:15, but when I got a hold of it, we were close to 2:20 for 2 minutes and 45. You know, now if Gina was on here, he'd go, Tom, I knew it. Because I always have a rule that if you want to play the tempo, you have to practice a little faster, because the human factor will kick you down to the tempo. So on the chart it said 2:15, and I always rehearsed it at 2:17. And Gino's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm not doing anything. You know, I'm not doing anything. I'm just, you know." But, and then, you know, slowly it creeps up. So there were probably moments we hit 2:20, but man, just, you know. But I knew it. We were not going to play clean, like a line that was, you know, not doing that. But I don't know. Looking back now, when I watch the closer, I'm like, oh my God, this is just unbelievable. And we will never see cores do that again.
Yeah, that style, I think it's kind of gone away. It might come back. Somebody might try to do something and then, oh wow, look at that, and what's old is new again, you know.
Jeff and I, you know, he's consulting with the cadets right now. He still writes a drill for me for indoor, and so, you know, we're always talking and stuff. And he just realized that what he loved to do, though, that kind of physical drill, you may see a drill move, but minutes on end, just, I don't know if you'll ever really see that. Because, you know, corps have kind of figured out that if they want to be competitive, that's probably not the way to go. You know, is it cool? Yeah, it's like you look back on, you know, 07, 08, and any of the years, but going for 2.5 minutes at, you know, 2:15. See, the thing, what was cool about being with the cadets was we always thought we were going to win. We always thought we were going to win drums. We always thought we were going to, like, do the most, and we were going to be able to do it. So if you said we were going to play 11.5 minute show at 215 beats a minute, I go, all right, let's go. We can do it. I'm serious. We had that mentality. You know, I don't think we have that anymore. Now, I think for a lot of corps is trying to figure out, you know, how to maneuver around, you know, what the top corps have done. Really, you look at like the top corps and you go, okay, that's what's doing it. You know, can we do some old cadets? Yeah, but is it? We don't now. We have to sleep, right? We have to eat right because there's mandates that come in from DCI.
Yeah.
You're not gonna.
Yep.
It's definitely not like it was.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But that's for the
It
better.
is. It
you know?
definitely is.
The kids get a better
Yeah.
experience.
So anyway, I just wanted to kind of finish that point. I just, you know, I'm proud of being part of that, I guess. Like looking back and people, you know,
For sure.
because in the middle of it, you're dying. You're like, oh, this is, you know. But then when you look back, you know, 15, 20, 30 years, you go, that was freaking cool. No one's going to do that for minutes on end, you know, like we did. So cool stuff.